Hello, and welcome back to lesson 2 of Science from a Half-Built Shed. And in this lesson, we're going to carry on investigating this limestone, a type of limestone called chalk, if you remember from last lesson. And we're going to look this time at how it was formed, how it was made, I suppose, how it came about. Now, we're also going to look at this other type of rock. This is called Flint, and this is found, or I found this next to the limestone in the Chiltern Hills. Before we get onto that, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this. This is an oyster. It lives in the sea. Poppy, could you give a close-up of the oyster, please? It's actually part of the family called mollusks. It's a bivalve mollusk. And this as well, this is a clam. Now, I got these from a fishmonger's near me. And last night for dinner, we cooked the clams. Here's one that was cooked. And the shell opens when you boil it. In water, or wine actually we used, and then had it with spaghetti, a bit of tomato, chilli, garlic and some parsley. Makes a really nice meal. We had that last night just for this experiment. So I'm now going to open up an oyster. I'm going to put a glove on for this because it's quite hard to do, and I'm going to use this, which is an oyster shucker. Really have to push down hard. There we go. And there. Now, try not to spill any of the liquid because it's still got quite a lot of liquid from the sea. Oh, don't spill it too much, Poppy. Thank you. And this is an oyster. It is actually alive at the minute. Put a little bit of Poppy hates these. Bit of Tabasco, bit of lemon juice. It's delicious. I like Poppy, enough with the noise. I love them. Okay, so now we've just got the oyster shell. And here's some of the clam shells from the meal last night. And here's some oyster shells. And I gotta say, I really did enjoy preparing for this lesson. Before we go any further though, I think because obviously what is the link between these shells and this limestone? So we're going to pause there and you're going to have a look again at the introduction video to this series. Okay, so here we are in a wood on a hill just north of London, and if you have a look down at the ground you can see that the rock that the ground is on is all white, and this is limestone. I'll just pick up a lump here. Now this is a type of limestone which is particularly soft. And what this tells us is that this used to be a seabed, because this rock is made from the remains of seashells from small animals in the sea that then died. And if you look out here, you should be able to see how high we are. So even though this is a hill now, this used to be the bed of the sea. And we're going to do an experiment with this rock. I'll take this home with me in a bit. So from that clip, you'll have noticed that I said that the chalk limestone, which I picked up in the Chiltern Hills. It's the first set of hills you come to if you drive north out of London. They were formed from the remains of animals that lived in the sea. So let's just go back a little bit, and when I say a little bit, let's just think about how old is the Earth. Well, it's mind-bogglingly old. It is actually roughly 4,540 million years old. It's been here a long time, and in that time it's gone through a huge number of changes, and it's still changing now. It changes slowly, but those changes are very dramatic. I'm going to skip out most of the history of the Earth, and we're just going to start looking at the Cretaceous period. Around 150 million years ago, there was a dramatic change in the climate of planet Earth, and that caused the end of what's known as the Jurassic period and the start of the Cretaceous period. 145 million years ago, the chalk of the Chilterns started to be formed. Now, to understand how that happened, we need to remember that Britain wasn't then where it is now. Britain is currently 51 degrees north of the equator. At the time, it was 35 degrees north of the equator, and it was roughly where Tunisia is now. And southern England, as it was, well, where it was at the time, was covered with a tropical sea, and that sea was no more than 300 metres deep. It was warm, and in the sea lived billions and billions of microscopic plankton. Now, the microscopic plankton did have some calcium carbonate in them, and they fell to the bottom and formed a layer on the bottom of the sea. But also there were ammonites, belemnites, echinoids, brachiopods, which are echinoids of sea urchins, brachiopods, and also bivalves. And they fell to the bottom of the sea and were compressed by the other layers and layers of shells and remains of sea creatures on top of them, and eventually compressed into limestone. Now, you may not believe that. So, to prove that that might be the case, what we could do with is showing that this stuff is made of the same calcium carbonate as this stuff. How are we going to do that? Poppy. I think the best thing to do is do the same experiment as we did in the last lesson. So I'm going to give Poppy this block, the goggles, the hammer and the gloves, and this time, instead of smashing up the rock, she's going to smash up some shells. Okay, Poppy, you ready? Right, show us what you're doing. What's that on the block? Okay, so we've got an oyster shell. Okay. Do. Apparently not. Great. Just get a close up of that. So there we are. I'm now going to get Poppy to grind it up in a pestle and mortar, and we're going to see if that reacts with acid in the same way that the chalk did. So Poppy's done her smashing and grinding, and here we've got little bits of shell from the oyster and the clams. I'm just going to put a few in here. Try and just use the smaller bits. Okay. Now, you'll remember from the last time that we put a little bit of the chalk crust onto a piece of cardboard. Put a bit of lemon on, you'll be able to see there, looks exactly the same as it did before. And that's because the shells are made of calcium carbonate, the same stuff as the limestone, because the limestone is made from the compressed and compacted shells. And I'm going to try it again, but this time let's use some of the 1 molar acid that we used last time. I'm not going to bother weighing it out this time, because we're not trying to prove anything about rate of reaction. Shove that in there. The acid. Okay. Oh no, better not do it like that. Into the small beaker. Put your lid back on your acid. Okay. And there we go. Just like before, loads of carbon dioxide produced, making calcium chloride and water as well. A vigorous reaction because it's the same stuff, essentially. Now, I want to show you something else that I think is quite interesting. I'm going to come out on the front this time. In this box, we've had this box, drawer, it's a drawer in our house, is a collection of, let me see if you can see what it is. This is actually in mudstone, not limestone, that we picked up from a beach in a place called Dorset. And Poppy, if you could just have a look at this. Hopefully you'll be able to see there. This rock is actually called shale. It's in layers. It's not made from the same thing, but it's also got bedded in the rock the remains, the fossilized remains of ammonites. And these are fossils. These creatures, here's another one, they don't exist anymore. They're hundreds of millions of years old. Here's another one. These are ammonite fossils, which we found in Dorset, in a place called the Jurassic Coast actually. It's the same place where Mary Anning found her fossils. Poppy's phone's just got off. Thank you, Poppy. Could you focus on this, please? There, more ammonites. We only found ammonites, I'm afraid. There wasn't really much else there to find. But these, yeah, they don't exist anymore. And they're hundreds of millions of years old. And ammonites are some of the creatures, Poppy? Some of the creatures that were used to make the chalk. Now, at the same time as finding the chalk, I found another rock called Flint. So I'd like you now to watch the next video where I talk about this rock. Hello again. So I've come out of London again to the Chiltern Hills, which is the same place where I did the previous film. Same rock there in slightly different location. If you have a look at the ground here, come closer, Matilda. So you can see, again, it's mostly chalky limestone, which is the soft version of limestone that we did the experiment on in the shed. But mixed in with it, we've got this slightly different rock, and this is called flint. Now, flint is also a sedimentary rock. The formation of flint, the detail of how it forms isn't fully understood, but it's often found amongst limestone layers. Limestone and flint are both obviously sedimentary rocks, but flint is quite interesting. So I pulled out, just picked up a bit further back along the path, some large pieces of flint. You can see it's a brownish colour with a white edge, and this has been an incredibly important material through human history. You need to remember that for the 200,000 years that humans have been around on the earth, for most of that time they didn't have any metals. The only metals that they had were rare precious metals like silver and gold and they're not particularly useful as materials for anything other than decoration because they're soft, they bend. So without metals, for most of human history, the only, or one of the only things they could use to cut things with was flint. And I'm going to show you how that happens. So let's see if this works. This is 2 pieces of flint. I'm just going to hit one with the other. Okay, and it comes off, here we are, in flakes. This is called flint napping. There are people in the world that are very good at it, but this is what through prehistory people used to have to do quite a lot, because this is how you got sharp edges. And for tools like axes and weapons for war, but also for hunting, this is what they'd have to do. And I'm going to show you just how sharp this edge is. Do you need to get a close-up on this, Matilda? So this is a shard of flint. It's got a very sharp edge there. I've just broken it off, or napped it off the original rock, and I need something to cut with it. Let's see what I've got in my bag. Oh, I know what. I've got a piece of paper here, which is actually the map of the footpath I'm walking along. So if I use this edge here, see that? It cuts like a knife. Very sharp. So that's flint. Also a sedimentary rock found amongst limestone in kind of large rounded stones, but when you break it apart you get these smaller pieces, flakes with very sharp edges. Prehistory, that's what we call the time in human history before writing was invented, and for most of prehistory this has been an incredibly important material. This is one of the few modern uses of flint. You can see here, these are flint, I think they're called flint cobbles actually, probably need to check on that, but these are pieces of flint that have been bedded in cement and used to make the wall at the base of this barn. And you'll still see flint used in this way quite often in areas where flint occurs naturally for walls of houses, barns, and the walls around the property. So that's what it's used for now. So flint, here it is. This is what I picked up, and I've had another go at smashing it apart, producing flakes, and I thought I'd just show you again quite how sharp this can be. Could you pan down to here, Matilda? So this is a leather gardening glove. It's too small for my children now, so and it's complete. And then this is a flint flake that I smashed off this morning. And there you can see it cuts through the leather quite easily. Why have I chosen leather? Well, leather is animal skin, so that shows that these little bits of flint could be turned into arrowheads for hunting, and were. Here's another piece with a sharp edge. I've got a piece of chicken here, which Matilda is going to cook for tonight's meal. This has got the skin on, it's the thigh, and there. It's cut through the skin and the muscle, the meat of the chicken, just like a knife would. So flint, really important material for Stone Age people before they managed to, or before the invention of the smelting of metal. Now, apart from precious metals like gold and silver, metals don't exist as you would know them. Iron, which steel is mostly, copper, tin, they have to be reacted at very high temperatures with carbon to get them out of the molecules, the oxide molecules, to form pure metal. And that only really started to happen, or only did happen, 5,000 years ago. So, in this lesson, we've covered a huge span of time. So I've drawn a sketch of a timeline on the board, starting 4,540 million years ago. I've written MYA for million years ago. That's when the Earth was formed. How was the Earth formed? Well, that's a whole different lesson, but basically it's the remains of an exploded star, stardust. The Earth is made of stardust, and all the atoms on the Earth, that's where they've come from. So, 4.5 billion years ago, or 4,540 million years ago, the Earth was formed. Life, the first, well, let's just put in first, about 4,400 million years ago, oceans formed. The first oceans formed on the Earth very early on. And then the first life formed, and the fossilised remains of microorganisms that are this old have been found from about 4,000 million years ago. So this was the first life. And throughout those thousands of millions of years, things changed. Because the Earth is constantly changing, slowly, but it's happening. Huge amount of time, mind-bogglingly long time. And then we've come in again 200 million years ago, so all the way down here. So let's say it's here. 200 million years ago, the ammonites that are in these fossils. Matilda, could you hold that a bit closer so that you can see it on the picture? These are the ammonites, the fossilised remains of animals that lived 200 million years ago in tropical seas covering Britain at that time. 145 million years ago, here we are, the chalk was formed. So 200 million years ago, those we've got the ammonites there. Actually, at the same time, when we went fossil hunting a few years ago, we did find other fossils, and I'll show you these. These are what are called belemnites. Matilda, could you hold that up to the camera? That's a belemnite that we found on the beach. And here's another one. Now, they might not look like much, but these are fossilised remains of sea creatures that don't exist anymore. They're now extinct. So, 200 million years ago, the ammonites, 145 million years ago, that's when the chalk from the Chilterns was formed. And then we talk about the flint. Now, the flint was formed at the same time as the chalk, but when did it start to be used? Well, it's only 200,000 years since the first humans walked the earth. And that's pretty much right up against here. So in the span of the Earth's history, humans almost haven't existed in terms of the time. 200,000 years ago. First humans. So I need to do a different timeline. So let's just rub this off. So first, let's do human history. 200,000 years ago. first humans up to the present day. So at what point was metal first extracted from rock? And the first metal we think to be extracted was copper, and it happened in the Middle East, and that was about 5,000 years ago. So 150, wow. Only here we have the first smelting, is what it's called, when you get metal out of its ore, the rock that the molecules of metal oxide are contained in. So for all this time, one of the most important materials for humans was flint. So there we are. I think we'll call that day for this lesson. There's loads of resources and extra reading around all the topics that we've covered here in the Google Classroom. If you just pan down for the Google Classroom link, Matilda. If you want to get the resources, put that link in to your Google Classroom and you can join the class, Science from a Half-Built Shed, and do the extra reading, look at the videos. There's a really interesting video on how we smelt, how the first metal was smelted, for example, and there's some good reading around how the Chilterns were formed, and also I put something in there about mass extinction events, because mass extinction events, really interesting how they happen, but also we're on the point of one happening right now. I think we'll call that a day. Thank you very much.